I was gone for just 2 weeks. 14 days. That's all it took for my peaceful lakefront ranch to turn into a battleground thanks to a woman named Karen and her precious HOA. The plan had been simple. I'd head out of state to help my cousin rebuild a barn that got flattened in a storm. We're tight, so I packed a bag, left my ranch in trusted hands, and figured I'd be back before anything serious could happen. I even made sure the gates were locked and the solar security system was running smoothly. What I didn't expect, not in a million years, was for a woman who doesn't own a single inch of my land to start trying to sell it. Let me give you some background. I live about 20 minutes outside a small lake town where the rich city folks have started building their vacation homes. A few years back, a fancy new neighborhood popped up just beyond my southern boundary. Gated community, tennis courts, pretentious signs that say things like Whispering Pines, luxury lakeside living. You get the picture. I didn't have a problem with them at first. They stayed on their side, I stayed on mine. My property is around 60 acres of woods, hills, and pasture, land passed down from my grandfather, to my dad, then to me. A few years ago, I took a backhoe and dug out a private lake in the lower corner of my ranch. Spent months getting the depth right, shoring up the sides, adding a dock, planting willows around the edges, even stocking it with trout. It was my retreat, my reward after years of service and hard work. But Karen? She had other plans. Karen's the self-appointed queen of the HOA, not elected, just loud. She's the kind of woman who walks her poodle like it's a royal parade, reports her neighbors for having unsightly mailboxes, and holds HOA meetings like she's running the Pentagon. I'd seen her a few times at the fence line, looking longingly at my lake, like she thought it should belong to her. I didn't think much of it. Until I came back home. When I pulled up that day, I noticed some odd things right away. Tire marks down by the lake. A few folding chairs by the dock that didn't belong to me. And then I spotted something half buried near my gravel path, a soggy real estate flyer. What I saw on it made my blood boil. It was advertising rare lakefront lots with exclusive water access. And the pictures? They were of my lake. My dock. The one I built with my own hands. It was like looking at someone trying to sell your car while it's still in your driveway. I marched straight down to the HOA development. I knew exactly which house was Karen's, big wraparound porch, wind chimes shaped like hummingbirds, and a car with custom plates that literally read, Karen 1. I rang the bell. She came out wearing oversized sunglasses, holding a wine glass like she was about to film an episode of Real Housewives, Suburban Tyrants. Before I could speak, she said in this syrupy sweet voice, "Oh. You're back early. Did you see the improvements?" I blinked. Improvements? She gestured vaguely toward my land. "We've really increased the value of your lake by making it a part of the Whispering Pines community." I stared at her. "You what?" She tilted her head like I was the one being difficult. Well, nobody was using it. It just made sense. People love water access. A few of the buyers already assumed it was part of the community. We've been showing them the views, letting them picnic. You've been trespassing, I cut in, fists clenched. And you've been trying to sell something that doesn't belong to you. She waved a hand like it was a minor detail. Oh, don't be dramatic. You should be thanking us. You probably just tripled your property value. That's when I realized she didn't just misunderstand. She genuinely believed she had the right to use my land. She thought because it was pretty and convenient, it somehow defaulted into being a community resource. I stepped back, struggling to hold my temper. "Karen, I want every single thing you've put on my land off it by sundown. Chairs, signs, paths, everything. And don't you ever step foot on it again." She laughed. Laughed like I was a misbehaving child. "Or what? You'll call the sheriff?" No, I said. I won't call anyone. I turned and walked away. Not because I didn't want to yell, but because I had a better idea. One that would remind Karen exactly whose land she'd messed with. By the time I got back to the ranch, I was already drafting the plan in my head. It wasn't going to be petty. It was going to be strategic. I'd seen power-hungry people before, overseas, in politics, even in business. People like Karen always overplay their hand. They think they're untouchable until you remind them whose name is on the title. The next morning, before the sun was even fully up, I rolled out my tool chest and started putting up signs. Bright red ones, private property. No trespassing. I installed a new gate down by the service road that led toward the lake. Heavy-duty steel, with a coated lock. Then I added motion-triggered cameras, the kind that sends alerts directly to my phone. It wasn't about being paranoid. It was about reclaiming what was mine. Later that afternoon, I heard voices, HOA folks down by the new gate, standing around like confused tourists. Karen was at the center, pointing, complaining, holding her phone. A few minutes later, I heard the distant sound of sirens. And I knew exactly what she'd done. She called the cops. On me. For blocking access to my own lake. That's when things really started to get interesting. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, as two sheriff cruisers pulled onto my gravel driveway. One deputy stepped out slowly, his sunglasses reflecting the morning sun, while the second stayed behind the wheel, likely waiting to see how this would unfold. Morning, the deputy said, hand resting casually near his belt. We got a call about a disturbance down by the lake, possible illegal gate installation, blocking community access. I nodded slowly and motioned for him to follow. Come on. Let's take a walk. We walked past the main barn, then around the ridge that overlooked the lake. As we came down the hill, I could see the group still gathered by the gate. Karen was pacing, arms flailing like she was running a protest rally. I could hear her voice carrying across the wind, loud, shrill, filled with words like rights, public access, and we already paid for this view. The deputy raised an eyebrow. She's really going at it. I chuckled under my breath. Wait till you see what she's fighting for. When we got to the gate, Karen immediately stomped over in her ridiculous sun hat, shoving her phone toward the deputy like she was handing him a warrant. Thank God you're here. This man locked us out of our own community lake. He's breaking the law, and I want him arrested. The deputy didn't take the phone. Instead, he turned to me. Is this your property, sir? Every inch, I replied, pulling a folder from my jacket. Inside, land surveys, title deeds, aerial photos, everything marked, signed, sealed. I handed it over, cool as ice. Karen's mouth was already hanging open. The deputy flipped through the papers, nodding slowly. This checks out. All of it. Lake, access roads, the whole thing, it's your private land. He looked over his shoulder at Karen. Ma'am, do you have any documentation saying otherwise? Karen scoffed like he just asked her to show her passport at a grocery store. I don't need documents. I'm the president of the HOA. We've been using this lake for weeks. It's obviously part of the community experience. The deputy gave a tight smile. Well, obviously doesn't mean anything legal. There's no easement here. No access rights granted. And if what he's saying is true, then technically, you've been trespassing. Karen turned red. Not pink. Red. Her jaw clenched like she was chewing gravel. I already showed this lake to 3 buyers, she hissed. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? I stepped forward, not to gloat, just to finish the job. Oh, I have every idea how it makes you look. You lied to people. You used my land for your personal agenda. And you never even asked. She looked like she was about to explode, but the deputy cut in before she could throw more accusations. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you're lucky Mr. Daniels hasn't filed charges yet. This could have gone real different. Don't push it." Karen threw her hands in the air and stormed off back toward her group, ranting under her breath about cowboys and backwater bullies. The deputy handed my folder back and smirked. "She's called us before, you know. Complained about her neighbor's grass being too wild, tried to report someone for having a flagpole without HOA approval. She's a piece of work." "I got that feeling," I said, shaking his hand. "Thanks for coming out." "Not a problem. You're well within your rights. Just keep those cameras rolling. Folks like her don't like losing." He was right. Karen wasn't the type to back down just because the law told her to. Later that afternoon, I saw a black SUV pull up near the HOA entrance. Two men in suits stepped out, clipboards in hand. Real estate agents. Probably here to explain to Karen that she can't sell fantasy land. I watched from the hilltop, sipping coffee, while they stood outside her porch. I couldn't hear them, but I didn't need to. The body language said it all: frustration, finger-pointing, then finally, resignation. The agents left. Karen's plan was falling apart. But I wasn't done. That night, I reviewed the security footage from the past 2 weeks. The new system captured more than just motion, it logged dates and faces. I saw HOA members hosting picnics by my dock, children splashing in my lake, even one guy setting up a hammock between my willows. And there was Karen, waving her arms like a tour guide, bragging about exclusive lake access. I copied everything onto a USB drive, labeled it insurance, and locked it in my desk. Because if she tried anything else, I was going to the county office myself. But Karen, being Karen, still hadn't accepted defeat. The next morning, I found flyers stuffed into the edge of my fence, bright yellow, with the title, "Save Our Lake." It called for an emergency HOA meeting. Claimed I was hoarding natural resources and damaging community cohesion. The usual buzzwords designed to rile people up. That's when I knew she wasn't just trying to save face, she was planning her next move. I could have stayed quiet. Waited to see what she'd pull next. But I've dealt with people like her before. They don't stop until you stop them. So I decided to strike first, not with threats, not with lawsuits, but with something a little more permanent. Something that would cut deeper than a fine or a warning. If Karen wanted to play games with my land, I was going to play chess with hers. And I knew exactly how to do it. It was late that same night when the idea came to me, not out of anger, but from pure strategy. Karen had spent the past few weeks trying to sell a lifestyle that didn't belong to her. She tried to turn my lake into her bargaining chip. Now, I was going to take the game off the board entirely. I pulled up the local property listings and focused on the land right next to Karen's house, a narrow 3-acre strip that ran between her property and the main access road to the rest of the Whispering Pines development. From what I remembered, the land had been left undeveloped because of a previous zoning issue, but it was privately owned. And now, after a quick call to the county office, I found out it was for sale. I didn't hesitate. I called the listing agent first thing the next morning. "I'll pay cash," I said. "Full asking price. No questions." The agent was surprised but didn't argue. By that afternoon, I was sitting with a notary at my kitchen table signing the deed. Less than 24 hours later, I officially owned the land that connected Karen's house to the community's only road. The moment the ink dried, I smiled. Not a petty grin, but the grin of a man who just cornered the queen in a very real game of real estate chess. Karen had no idea. 2 days later, I started building. At first, she must have assumed I was just putting up a fence for privacy. A few wooden posts, some string lines, a couple of workers with tool belts. She didn't say a word, not at first. But by the end of the second day, when the posts rose taller and the beams were reinforced with steel anchors, Karen walked over in her flip-flops, her dog in one hand and a latte in the other. "What exactly are you doing here?" she asked, doing her best to sound polite. I wiped my hands, looked at the tall posts, then back at her. "Building a barrier. This land's mine now." Her jaw tensed. "You bought this lot?" "Yep. Whole 3 acres. Private sale. Just closed on it." She blinked like I'd slapped her with a spreadsheet. But that's the only road in and out of this cul-de-sac." I shrugged. "Sure is." Her voice sharpened. "You can't block people in. It's illegal." I pulled a folded copy of the land plat out of my back pocket and held it out to her. "Actually, there's no legal right-of-way on this lot. Your HOA's been using it as access by assumption, not by deed. And now? I'm revoking that permission." Karen stared at the paper like it was written in another language. I continued, calmly. "You want access through this land? I'm offering easement leases. But it'll cost a lot." She dropped her latte. It splashed across the gravel, forgotten. "This is extortion." "No ma'am," I said, smiling. "This is land management." Karen stormed off, screaming about lawyers, lawsuits, and taking this to the county board. I didn't stop her. Let her rant. Let her throw money at fancy lawyers. Because I had done my homework, and I knew 2 things for certain. 1, she had no claim. 2, I owned the only legal access route in and out of her property. The fence went up in 3 days. Solid wood, 8 feet high, no gaps. It wasn't just about blocking the view, it was about sending a message. Whispering Pines was now officially landlocked. Karen tried to rally the HOA board. They sent me a formal community violation notice, accusing me of obstructing community flow and violating neighborhood spirit. I sent them back a picture of the title deed and a handwritten note, "Not in your HOA. Not your problem." The real panic began when Karen tried to list her house again. Turns out real estate agents don't like trying to sell properties with no legal road access. Every buyer backed out once they learned the truth, that unless they struck a deal with me, they'd be trapped. By the end of the week, Karen's so-called dream home was a financial prison. And I hadn't even sued her yet. One evening, I saw her standing by the fence, alone, just staring. No dog. No phone. Just her, arms crossed, biting her lip. I walked over. "You had a chance to do things the right way," I said. "You could have asked. You could have respected the line. But you tried to take what wasn't yours." She didn't say anything. Didn't argue. Didn't apologize either. "You want access?" I continued. "You'll pay. Monthly lease. Triple market rate. Annual renewal. And you sign a binding agreement that you'll never touch another inch of my land again." Karen finally looked at me. Her voice was flat. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "No," I said truthfully. "But I am done being pushed around." She didn't respond. She just turned and walked away. The next day, the "for sale" sign in her front yard came down. I heard she was looking for buyers off-market, trying to get out without losing everything. Word spread through the community. Some folks were furious. Others were quiet, maybe realizing she'd brought this on herself. But the best part came a week later. Another property near hers, a Lakeview lot that Karen once bragged about reserving for a celebrity client, hit the market. I called the agent. Made another cash offer. Now I own the lake, the access road, and half the lots surrounding Karen's old house. The same house that she had to sell. To me. She moved out quietly. No party, no goodbye. Just a moving van and a pale, bitter expression. And me? I watched from my dock, line in the water, coffee in hand. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't noise or lawsuits, it's ownership. Pure, clean, legal ownership. It didn't take long for word to spread that I now owned Karen's former property. It was poetic, really. She had tried to sell a lake she didn't own, and in the end, I bought the very roof over her head. The same one where she'd once hosted HOA wine nights and given herself awards for community leadership. Now she was gone, and I had full control of the land, the lake, the access, and the silence she used to disturb. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think the rest of the HOA would get the message. But people like Karen, they plant seeds. And sometimes, the weeds grow even after the gardener is gone. A few of the newer Whispering Pines residents, folks who bought into the illusion Karen sold them, started approaching me. Some politely. Others, not so much. Sir, we were told the lake would remain accessible to the neighborhood. I moved here because of the view, now there's a wall. You have no right to hold the entire community hostage. I kept my responses calm. Firm. Professional. I didn't take anything from you. I'm just protecting what's mine. You were misled, and not by me. Some of them backed off after that. A few sent letters through lawyers. I responded with my own, full of legal maps, dated documentation, and the sheriff's written confirmation that everything was above board. I knew what they were trying to do. Apply pressure. Shame me into compromise. But what they didn't understand is, I'm not some grumpy old landowner stuck in his ways. I'm a former military man, son of a rancher, grandson of a pioneer. I don't back down when I know I'm right, and I sure as hell don't let people walk over my property lines. So I decided to make things permanent. I commissioned a survey crew to clearly mark every inch of my land bordering Whispering Pines. Then I paid to have a security fence installed all the way around the lake. 10 feet high, anti-climb design, reinforced steel gates, full perimeter cameras, solar floodlights at night. Not to intimidate. Just to end the debate. When the trucks rolled in to start the build, the HOA held a community emergency meeting, complete with a podium, folding chairs, and a banner that said, "Our lake, our right." They even brought in a local news crew, trying to paint me as the villain. The reporter came out to my ranch and tried to frame it like I was hoarding nature. I handed her a copy of the property deed and smiled. You're standing on private land. This isn't a community lake. It never was. This is 3 generations of my family's sweat and sacrifice. Would you want strangers throwing parties in your backyard just because they liked the grass? She went quiet after that. The segment never aired. Karen may have left, but her legacy of entitlement lingered. The HOA tried to negotiate a community buyout. They offered me a number, laughably low. I told them they couldn't afford my land, and even if they could, I wouldn't sell it to people who tried to steal it first. Then came the wild card. One evening, I got a knock on my door. It was a young woman, early 30s, professional looking. She introduced herself as an attorney representing a group of Whispering Pines homeowners. They're hoping you'd consider a compromise, she said. Perhaps shared access on weekends, under supervision, with signed waivers. I poured her a glass of iced tea, let her sit by the window overlooking the lake. Then I told her what I told everyone else, this lake was built by me. For me. I don't owe access to people who only discovered it because someone lied. And I certainly don't owe it to people who called the cops on me for protecting what I own. She sighed and nodded. I figured. But I had to try. I appreciated that she came in good faith. I even let her fish off the dock for half an hour before she left. Eventually, the noise died down. The letters stopped. The HOA shifted its focus to landscaping rules and mailbox heights again. Some residents put up taller hedges to block the view of my fence. Others quietly apologized when they saw me in town. I didn't hold grudges. Not against the ones who were just misled. But Karen? She didn't disappear entirely. About 6 months later, I saw her name on a petition to regulate rural land development in residential adjacent communities. It didn't pass, of course, but it told me one thing. She still hadn't learned. Still thought she could control what wasn't hers. Still thought entitlement was stronger than ownership. I framed her original flyer, the one that advertised my lake as a shared community gem. Hung it right in my shop, next to the mounted trout I caught on the lake's first morning. It's a reminder. Not of revenge. But of resolve. See, people often confuse kindness with weakness. They think a man who keeps to himself, who fishes, builds fences, minds his own land, is someone they can step over. Manipulate. Use. But people forget the quiet ones know how to endure. How to wait. How to strike once, clean, legal, final. Now, every time I walk down to the lake, I remember the moment she tried to take it. I remember the look on her face when she realized I bought the land under her feet. I remember the day the fence was finished, when I turned chaos into peace again. I fish more these days. Built a small boathouse. Even installed a floating dock with lanterns that glow at night. Sometimes, I invite local kids from the town over to learn how to cast a line. Real families. Good folks. The kind who respect the land they're on. And when I sit on the dock, watching the sun set over the water I built with my own 2 hands, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel pride. Because in the end, Karen called the cops on me for protecting my own lake. But now? I own her house, her access, and her silence. And that's more satisfying than any courtroom victory ever could be. Let me know if you want.